Roach gets it in. Filipowski heading for the lane on the spin. Today, Hunter. Hall working on Filipowski. In the lane. The second on the way. And the Tigers pressure on him. Here's Proctor. Proctor across midcourt. Proctor looking to get a shot in the air, round the back. He fires it up there, left it well short. There is a whistle. A foul on the play.
To settle, and there's a lot of contact on there. That's a foul, OB. You look at the left arm of Beetle. It makes contact with the right arm of Tyrese Proctor as he...
Everybody holding their breath here. And it makes the pair. Duke leads 72-71. 1 second to go. Gerard trying to get it in. Long pass, knocked around, and Duke cradles in, and they win the ball game. 72-71. The final today.
Last year's game with Clemson was certainly a close contest. Some may argue controversial. And Clemson, we've been talking a lot about Duke's revenge tour. Clemson's certainly looking for revenge in this one, where they get the Blue Devils at home. And Clemson coming off a triple overtime loss at home to Georgia Tech. This has a little bit extra motivation to come back on Saturday and beat the Blue Devils. And it's going to be Duke's most difficult test in quite some time. And on paper, this should be a tremendous basketball game.
Well, certainly going into the game, it's the hardest test we're going to get. However, there are those two other games where we're going, no, we're going to lose here. But no, on paper, you're absolutely right. But Chase Hunter did have a 3-point attempt to potentially send it into the fourth overtime, but he missed it.
He also had attempts at the end of regulation and in either the first or the second overtime to win the game, which he did not. There's just a lot of opportunities. This is a weird thing to say. It was one of the worst triple overtime games I've ever watched. The defense was decent. There was just a lot of unforced turnovers and missed shots, and here's the thing with that. Clemson is going to play much better than they did against Georgia Tech. That's just how these things work. They're going to shoot much better, and they are going to be extremely motivated to beat Duke, who's coming off of an absolute beatdown of Syracuse in a game that was just not a contest. They are flying high. The one thing I will quibble with you on, I know you've mentioned the two games. The Wake Forest game, I did think could be trouble heading into it. The NC State game, I'm completely with you. Trey Parker averaged 3 points. He scored 15. It still bothers me to this day. They're just, but this Clemson game, I think, is going to be a great test for Duke, and it's a test that it's needed because, as you've harped on, they haven't had a lot of opportunities to play good opponents in ACC play, and this is going to be a quad one opportunity. Not many of those for Duke in ACC play, and I think this is going to be a good test for Duke in terms of their resilience, which they've shown a number of times this year, but just keep building that muscle, if you will.
They occasionally bend, but the tree branch doesn't break there. And there's so many reasons why I'm actually looking forward to see if we can continue the kind of play that we saw against Syracuse, meaning that the defense was stifling, but it was team defense. And the offense, they put up 83 points, and the leading scorer for the game was Proctor at 16. And I love the idea that the distribution of the points is coming from everybody, and especially Because we've already seen that if it's not going well, there's this other guy we can give the ball to. I pledge allegiance to the flag, and Cooper Flag can take over in the last 10 minutes of the second half in case. But I love when Cooper is trying to bring his teammates into the game and doing his thing. He's so versatile. There's just so many things he can do. So it's going to be very interesting to see which way Cooper plays this game.
And to that point, we'll get into it more later. I suspect this is a game where Cooper has to score more than he did certainly against Syracuse. We've seen throughout the season there are games where Cooper just has to score more points for Duke to win. And then there are other games where he's more distributor, playmaker, and he's kind of more just involved in the offense versus taking over the offense. And I think this game, certainly in the second half, it could call for Cooper to just, all right, get him the ball and everyone else kind of figure out where you need to be so Cooper can either get it to you or he has the space to operate and get off his own shot.
Yeah, look, I'd have no problem if he put up 30 and we're sitting there going mesmerized again. However, in the last two games, I truly enjoy that this identity of the Duke team on offense and defense coming in as a clear, just an impressive integration. The sum is greater than the parts that are there, and it could be that identity that we're going to play as a team on defense. We're going to play as a team on offense. And if we need it, we've got Cooper in our back pocket to go off. But the idea that they're it was such a well-balanced game for Duke on both sides of the court that I would love to see that continue, because that identity can be ridden all the way through March Madness.
Certainly. So let's break down this game, and let's start getting into Clemson on what we've said this is a big matchup. I've said for over a month this is the game that
longer.
Maybe longer. You're right. This is the game that I circled on the calendar and said, in part because of I thought Clemson would be looking for revenge, but also as the year has gone on, they've been the two best teams in the conference. And Duke is coming into this game 20-2,
20-2,
16-game winning streak.
12-0 in the conference.
Yes, and Clemson not far behind, 18-5. They're 10-2 in the conference, which they are tied with Louisville, which is the other team that they lost to in conference play besides Georgia Tech. Going back to that Louisville loss, they have won 6 out of 7. This is a team that's playing really good basketball, and Coach Brownell, as you alluded to in the post game, he will be the longest tenured head coach in the ACC after this year, when Leonard Hamilton, I don't know what the right term would be, is forced to step down from the helm at Florida State.
You'll put him in the Jim Larinaga category of not quite certain, but he's no longer the coach.
Yes, he will certainly no longer be the coach. Brownell has 450 wins in his college career. He's been a coach for 23 years. This is his 15th season at Clemson. Last year, as a lot of you guys I'm sure remember, they went to the Elite Eight, led by P.J. Hall, who was certainly their best player last year. And this, go ahead.
Jack, I went to, I often do that just to see, given my history of, watching the ACC and college basketball. So I went to look up, who are the leading studs that played at Clemson? Like who are those players that, you just remember? So I got to tell you, PJ Hall, okay, reasonable college ball player, not quite memorable after that. And if you go back to Clemson history, you come up with names like Greg Buckner, Horace Grant, Tree Rollins, Eldon Campbell, Larry Nance, and Dale Davis. A terrific player with Indiana and those Nick Indiana things. However, those players all played a long time ago at Clemson. And the most recent guy is Jaron Glossum Game, something like that, who played there from 2013 to 2017. And so therefore, they haven't had a dominant star at Clemson. And yet, and this is, I'm going to just see where I'm going with all this, haven't had that dominant star and yet made it to the Elite Eight. And therefore, I give their coach a lot of credit. He's a good coach. He's done a lot with the players he's had. And I think it's, a credit to him. And, I've watched the post-game interview with Syracuse's coach. When things aren't quite, going for you there when, you're just looking down at the stat sheet. And I think we had a good moment. Yep. That's it. Yeah. Any questions?
It's been a tough year for Coach Autry.
So take us through the starting team and the reserves.
There is one player you forgot, which I'm sure this will be a fun fact for a lot of our watchers and listeners. DeAndre Hopkins was on Coach Brownell's first team at Clemson. Now, you might be saying, well, who's DeAndre Hopkins? You're not a big football guy. He's been a tremendous wide receiver in the NFL for a number of years now. And he's pretty much at the end of his career, but he is on the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this Sunday. And I know, he might catch a pass or two. He hasn't had a big role, but he was a tremendous wide receiver for a number of years. And just a funny thing when I was looking through Coach Brownell's history that I noticed, he got, he played in like 5 or 6 games his freshman year with the basketball team.
Like I was saying, there are just not a lot of recent memorable players that went on into the NBA and from Clemson. You do think of Clemson as a football school, and
at least lately.
Well, yeah, the guys I named are from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and it's been quite a while there. But I would be foolish to not be taking this game lightly. They are going to be
Yes, I think we may have lost you there for a second. I think you might be back. But the only other deep cut name, I know the connection's not great. I'm not sure what's going on. The only other deep cut name I'll throw out while we try to get JD's connection a little bit better is KJ McDaniels, who's certainly no star, but had some highlights on the process Sixers back in like the mid 2010s. So let's go through this Clemson roster. This is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. They shoot 38% as a team. They are certainly led by Chase Hunter, who is in his 6th year of college basketball and is shooting far better than he ever has. He's leading the team at 18 points per game, 44% from 3, which leads the conference. And it's just been a steady, reliable scorer for Clemson. Joining him in the backcourt has been their Joe Girard replacement, Jaden Zachary, who Duke fans should be familiar with. He played at Boston College before joining Clemson. And he, for as good as Joe Girard was for Clemson offensively. Jaden Zachary has been the same, but defensively. And he's averaging about 2 steals per game, along with leading them at just over 3 assists per game. Ian Shefflin, he is back. He's a senior. He plays power forward. I like Ian Shefflin's game. It's not pretty. He's not athletic. He's not overly skilled, but he just finds a way to get the job done. He's averaging 12 points, 9.5 rebounds, about a block and a steal per game, and he's their second leading passer at 3 assists per game. He's had some moments where he's flirted with a triple-double. Their center spot was their PJ Hall replacement, which is Victor Lakin, and he came over from Cincinnati. He is averaging 10.6 rebounds, a steal, and almost 2 blocks per game. And most importantly, he can stretch it. He's shooting 37% from 3, which is going to make Malawach have to come out and respect Lakin's 3-point shooting game. And in between the guards and the forwards, or at least the front court, is Chauncey Wiggins, who's had a much better year than he did last year, getting more consistent minutes. He also is shooting much better than he did last season at 40% from 3, averaging 10 points and 3 rebounds. And quickly to go through the starting lineup before I get some comments and we go to the bench from UJD. They stand 6'1", Zachary, but he's 215 is what he's listed at. He's a really strong guard, really good defender. Chase Hunter is 6'4", Chauncey Wiggins is 6'10", Ian Shefflin is 6'8", and Lakin is 6'11". So this is going to be, it's not going to be like the typical games where Duke also has a size advantage. So you've got Clemson has good size, and they're a really good 3-point shooting team, which have been some areas where Duke, those have been the things that have given Duke some issues in the past. And we're going to get into one more thing in just a little bit here.
So I have a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, the game itself, to our listeners, is on at 6:30. Most people, had it scheduled for 6 o'clock. And Clemson actually asked for the game to be shifted to 6:30 because there's another game on ESPN, and they didn't want to have to sit around and wait, and we would be watching golf or something, So it turns out that it's the Lakers and the Pacers, and it is Luka's first game with the Lakers, and they wanted nothing to do with the idea that people were absolutely going to be curious about watching that game. And so the game was shifted from 6. Everyone mark your calendars to 6:30. Second thing, a lot of Duke news in the NBA deadline. A lot of Duke players shifting teams. And so Marky Mark, one of Mark Williams from Charlotte, is off to – actually, he'll be part of that Laker game. In which case, you guys, if you turn on early, you get to watch Mark Williams. Brandon Ingram, he's going from south of the country in NOLA to out of the country in Toronto, where he'll be joining R.J. Barrett. Zion is still remaining with the Pelicans with that, hefty contract. Leave it at that. And then Cam Reddish is part of the trade, so he winds up on Charlotte now.
Yes.
So just a couple of things that I thought, our listeners would want to know about, Duke and the NBA as the NBA trade deadline ended.
Perfect intermission. Let's go into the Clemson bench now. So Clemson off the bench, their clear 6th man is Dylan Hunter, who is Chase Hunter's younger brother. 5 points, 2 assists, and a steal for the younger Hunter. 7, 8. They depending on the game, they'll play 8 guys, but Coach Brownell, he will be depending on the matchup, certain guys will play more or less. And so Jake Heidbreder has been a guy who he played more in the game against Georgia Tech, went to triple overtime. Some guys fouled out. That's part of the reason for why. But he's a really good shooter. Listed at 6'5". He's averaging 5 points per game, but shooting about 46% from three. He's a redshirt junior transfer. Then freshman Del Jones, who the games I've watched, he has done some, he's flashed a lot of potential. Some very acrobatic finishes. 4 points. He's also a 40% shooter. They just have great three-point shooting team, as I mentioned before. But Del Jones is a real wild card for this Clemson team. Then let's say the ninth guy is a guy all Duke fans should be familiar with, Christian Reeves. This will be his first opportunity to play against Duke. He played in his second most minutes of his college basketball career, 10 minutes in the triple overtime game, and had a career high 7 rebounds. It was the most he kind of was playing 2 minutes here or there, had not played in a couple games of late. He has played in the majority of games for Clemson, just not, more or less 5 minutes per game. And then lastly, Miles Foster is a grad transfer who gives them size in the front court at 6'7", 245. But he's really the 10th guy on this Clemson roster. The other thing I was alluding to earlier that Clemson does well that could give Duke issues. They are one of the best teams in terms of they don't turn it over very much, and they do force the other team into turnovers. They have a good ratio in terms of, or differential is the better term, in terms of the amount of turnovers that they have versus the ones that they generate, which is another area which will help them in this game against Duke. And I mentioned it before. I'm going to get into the matchups in just a minute here, but Coach Brownell has a lot of lineup versatility similar to Coach Shire in that, yes, the starting lineup is Zachary, Hunter, Wiggins, Shefflin, and Lakin, but at times they'll play smaller with Shefflin at the 5. So that could be a lineup we see when Malik Brown is in the game. Shefflin will play the center spot, and they'll bring in Hunter or Heidbreder off the bench and play a little bit smaller but quicker and a little bit more versatile offensively. And so that's just one example of Brownell's versatility that he likes to have, or that he has, I should say, with this Clemson team.
Without PJ Hall, I was sort of between the memories of coming back of Ian Shefflin and PJ Hall playing together, and the big guys. And then when you described who came in to take PJ's place and his size, height, averaging 10 rebounds a game.
10.6 rebounds.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought, okay. Look, I saw this as initially it's a must win for Clemson because they get a chance to beat the number 2 team. It's not a must win because if they should lose, their record will get them into March Madness. They will make it. And instead, what is even sometimes worse than a must win is because you have the nerves, of we got to win this game. This is a want to win game. This is we want to beat them after last year and the highlights that we showed early in the intro here. And that makes it very, very dangerous between their size, their 3-point shooting. So that certainly is going to be an issue. On the other hand, I do think that Duke has to show that they can beat somebody of Clemson's caliber. That it's nice to in a vacuum suggest that we continue to march through the ACC, and I'm sorry, Jack, I'm staying with this other theme that in the Big 12 and SEC they're playing against top 25 teams almost every night. And Duke, this is a chance for Duke to show how good they are. And that's why I think this is a very important win. And Coach Shire is going to get them up for this. We know, look, that it's 16 straight games. Are they going to just, run the table? Well, we're at 12, so this could be number 13. But the likelihood is they're going to lose a game somewhere. They're either going to lose it in the ACC. This is the one you pointed out for a long time. Could be the game against Illinois up in New York. Or it could be, just a thriller in the ACC. One of those three, if they win all three of those, they run the conference, they win the ACC tournament, they go to New York, they beat Illinois, I'm going to be the happiest guy around. But there's also always the talk about, do you want to go into the tournament with the announcer saying, well, at this point, Duke has won, 27 games in a row or something, and just get that out of there and let them, because I've told you this many times when I used to coach you, that I could coach much more from a loss. I could teach more lessons to the players on the team than just keep winning, because there's so much more to point out in a loss. So, that's kind of why I think this game's so important to Duke and at the same time to Clemson.
I'm going to push back a little bit here, and I'm going to make you just clarify something for me, because you said something which was basically, to paraphrase, Duke hasn't really beat anybody. But I would say Auburn was a pretty big win. So are you, just let me ask the question, then you can clarify. So are you saying that since Auburn, they haven't had an opportunity, because they've played Louisville. Louisville's turned out to be good, but they weren't as good when Duke played them, for sure. Who else? I mean, Wake Forest. There hasn't been a ton of opportunities post Auburn, if that's what you're saying.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. That once they got to ACC play and they've won 12 in a row in the ACC, the games that Shire scheduled in the early part of the season when these guys were true freshmen are very different than where they are come time for the tournament. The expression is always, there are no freshmen anymore by the time the tournament begins. And so, yes, that was just a fabulous game. It was on our home court. We wouldn't have won without Isaiah Evans just going out of his mind in that first half with 6 3-pointers. So, yes, I'm leaving the 4 early games, the Auburn, the Kansas, the Kentucky, and Arizona game. I'm leaving them aside because that was Coach Shire early on saying, I want you guys to know what it is to play against top teams. But then since then, we're ranked 2, but we're not playing the level of competition that Auburn is or Kentucky is.
Well, I mean, Kentucky, they're on a slide right now. I don't know how much it keeps going like this. I don't know if they'll still be ranked. But I see your point.
Did you hear that, our Kentucky nation? Jack says you're not going to be ranked.
I said if it keeps going like this, I think they're long gone though. I don't think we'll hear from them unless Duke somehow plays them in the tournament, which I would love, by the way. I would love if that were to happen. Yeah, I just think
so would Cooper Flagg.
He would love it way more than me. I don't think anybody would love it more than Cooper Flagg, based off everything we know about Cooper Flagg. All right, one interesting stat before we give our predictions. Maybe you've got your 3 keys. Clemson on the year before the triple overtime loss to Georgia Tech was 11-0 when Chauncey Wiggins scored in double figures, which was very reminiscent to me of like the Mark Mitchell stat from last year. It was like whenever Mark Mitchell had more than, I think it was also double figures, Duke was like, 14-2 or something. And I don't know how much you want to put into it. They're 11-1 after they lost to Georgia Tech. But the matchups are going to be very interesting. I think Proctor probably guards Hunter. I think everyone is probably on the same page there. And then after that, I think it will depend on who's on the court for Clemson and, more importantly, how they're playing. And what I mean by that is I think, to start the game, probably Sion is guarding Zachary. You've got Knipple on Wiggins, who does like to shoot over smaller players, especially from mid-range, but Knipple's not much smaller, so I don't think he'll have too much of an advantage there. Flag's probably on Shefflin, and Malawach is on Lakin. And I think that probably stays the same unless Flag is in foul trouble or Shefflin he's able to kind of muscle him a little bit around and get rebounds. And then I think we could see Sion switch to Shefflin because he'll have the strength to deal with him. And then Cooper either guarding Zachary or Wiggins, which he'll be able to do a little bit easier on the perimeter, which I think is more where his strength lies.
So I already gave my thoughts about the, must win, want to win, and why that's problematic. It's going to be a tough game, but wow, would it be great if Foster could somehow build on the minutes he had against Syracuse. And, it's a great game for him to do that. On the other hand, Isaiah Evans could just, do it again and just go off from three, and that could happen. I dare say, though, we never know. Mason Gillis should be back for this game. And that could be very important because I love, that I love having Mason Gillis, Sion James, and Malik Brown. And Malik is a real X factor in every game because he's so disruptive. So whatever your plan is coming in, it's not because he doesn't start, it's not okay, here's what we're going to do. Well, then Malik Brown comes in and just completely disrupts everything due to deflections, steals, blocks, rebound, everything. So I'm going to give you my prediction, Jack. I think this is on the road against a team that really wants to win. So this is going to come down to a very close game. I think it's going to be played in the low 70s, and I have it as 75-72. Duke walks out of there with a win.
Okay. I certainly realized after I came up with my score prediction, I was biased from last year. But this is what I came up with, so I'm going with it. I very, very similar. I think it's going to be a defensive game, a little bit of a tough slog. I've got Duke winning 72-68, my final score. Very, very much on the same page here. And quickly, I want to circle back. Mason Gillis, I agree. If he was sick, whatever it was, I think we could actually really need him in this game because it's going to be a raucous environment. Like this, Clemson, I don't know if you were able to watch any of the game with Georgia Tech, but it was your favorite color commentator, Mr. Boeheim, and I don't know what was going on with the sound, but it was like the microphones were in the student section, so the whole game you could just hear not yelling, but specific sentences phrases, one-word interjections from the student section. They were loud. I would probably use some other words that I may not want to say. And it was a good environment, for a Georgia Tech game. So I imagine it will be through the roof against Duke.
Well, now that you tell me that Boeheim did the game, I now understand how a triple overtime game could not be exciting.
Well, yeah, the play-by-play guy was Wes Durham. He didn't help very much. Kevin Brown, he tried. Kevin Brown was doing the best he could. Wes Durham did not. He did not help. All right, we're kind of going off the rails here. It's probably a good place to wrap it up, unless you've got any.
One more. I want to shower love on my guy Dickie V, who will be there to help call the game. He will be with two other people, so I don't think they're going to try to tax his vocal cords too much. But man, am I happy that he is going to be there to get to do another game in college basketball. He's beat cancer 4 times, and no one has raised more money. That's not true. He has raised a lot of money in his effort through the Dickie V Foundation to combat cancer, especially after his friend Jim Valvano died and succumbed to cancer. So, in the spirit of Jimmy V, I'm going to say, no matter what happens on that court, Duke, never give up. Never give up. We're going to win this game. We're going to go ahead and Jack, take it away.
And we'll see you guys post-game. Should be around 8. I don't know. Based off the last Clemson game, it could be 9:30. But, I would assume realistically about 8:40, 8:45 post-game. As always, no matter what. So make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you guys post-game. Peace.